Thank you so much for carving out the time to do this.
No problem. It's a pleasure after all these years that you've had connections to my son Ryan, and you and I have crossed paths a few times. So I appreciate the opportunity to do your podcast.
Awesome. I appreciate it. So let's pretend you and I are actually doing this at Starbucks. What am I ordering for you?
Oh man, I'm easy. Something venti,
Yeah.
typically a dark roast of some sort, a little cream. Although if I have my choice, I've learned the delicacy of heavy whipped cream in my coffee, a little bit of
Uh,
sweetener. Yeah, so sometimes I take my own little whipped cream with me. Makes it better.
that's funny. My wife drinks like tea, like a London fog, so she'll have heavy cream. She'd be like the only one in the household who uses heavy cream for anything, be it or
I'm
tea.
with her. I'm with her. Everybody
Yeah.
listening, they're like, "What's with all this big gallon, a half gallon of heavy cream?" I'm like, "It's my coffee."
Okay. So if the barista asks your name as you order, what name are you giving them?
I don't give them pistol. I give them. I typically give them Keith, my real name. So
Okay.
yeah.
That's what I was getting at. Okay, cool. I heard you talk about the origin of your nickname and that you looked up to Pistol. Is it that you looked up to Pistol Pete? He was one of your favorite players.
When I was a kid, which was just the time he was leading the country in scoring, averaging 44 points a game when there was no 3-point line. I loved everything about the way Pete Maravich played basketball. And so I made my kids, when they were little, watch the 5 video series of instructional videos made by Pete Maravich back in the day. And they actually did kind of like them because we'd then go out in the driveway and we'd all try to do what Maravich was doing on the tape. And I flubbed my way through it. My kids are much better athletes than I, as has been proven many times over. But to tease me, they were calling me Pistol, and they kept doing it. And they were only like 6 and 8 years old, and the rest of their lives growing up, they and all their friends called me Pistol, and it continued on when they went to college. Their college friends called me Pistol, and it culminated for me when I've only got two NFL jerseys signed and hanging on my wall. One is from Brett Favre that I got at Christmas one year from AJ, and it says "To Pistol, Brett Favre," right? And then I got another one 3 or 4 years later from Aaron Rodgers, and again it says "To Pistol, best wishes, Aaron Rodgers." So it carried all the way through, continues to carry through all of their friends. Anybody that's under about 50 years old in my community here tends to know that name from my children rather than my real name. So my other buddies are like, where'd this come from? So
That's funny. What did they call you at work? Like when you were at LexisNexis?
it depends on who was doing the calling, but my friends, Hawkman,
Oh, that's funny.
behind the scenes. So no, I'm pretty well a first name basis. So yeah.
That's cool. Were there any other athletes that you looked up to growing up?
Yeah, although their later lives didn't always prove out. I was a big Pete Rose fan. I loved the way he hustled, always relentless going after it. He was in the sport of baseball. I was in the Cincinnati area, and that was the days of Pete Rose, Johnny Bench, and all those guys that were so great. So I was a big Pete Rose guy back in the day. I even had his number inside my high school ball glove just to remind me how Pete Rose played. Right. And
Wow. What was it about Pete Rose that you really admired about him?
always, always, always going as hard as he could, all out. And he was an effort guy, and I felt I was limited athletically. I played, but I had to find every edge I could get, and to me, it was outworking everybody, out trying everybody, and baseball worked out for the best for me. But yeah, so I was a fan because of just his approach to the game. It wasn't all just pure skill. It was he absolutely made himself great.
That was like his nickname was Charlie Hustle, right? I imagine that was around
Yeah,
effort.
yeah. The Philadelphia Phillies Stars gave him that name when he was a young guy, and they said, "Look at Charlie Hustle." Actually, I think it was the Yankees. I think it might have been Mickey Mantle. Gave him that nickname because when he was young, they were kind of teasing him, but it stuck.
So if you had a Hall of Fame vote, would he have gone in?
Can't bet on the game. That was the rule. Ironic now that gambling is an integral part of professional sports. So I suspect these days he would have been suspended for 60 days, and then they'd have moved on. But um, a bunch of old guys that ran baseball over the last 50 years have kept him out. So I saw that the president recently said he was petitioning for Rose to get into the Hall of Fame. So I suspect it may happen.
Yeah, I felt the same way about like Shoeless Joe Jackson. I just felt like that you know, with whatever happened back in whatever 1919 or whenever it was, it seemed like he didn't have much to do with it. But it's an interesting thing, the Hall of Fame. I think Bonds should go in too, but that's another story.
Well,
Another story for another podcast.
podcast, but yes, we
Yeah.
have. Yeah.
Did you, when you were growing up, did you ever collect baseball cards or anything
Always
as a
did.
youngster? You did.
And the irony is that my mom, when I left home, when I was 18, went off to college, never really lived there a lot after that. She threw away she kept virtually everything I had. My bedroom when I went home, it was just like when I left it, except she threw out my baseball card. So I had like my Pete Rose rookie card, my Johnny Bench rookie card, all those things are all gone. So it's the only thing she got rid of.
That's funny. It's such a common story. I started recollecting about a year ago with my kids, and it's been a lot of fun with them, like going to the card shop. It's very nostalgic, but that's a very common story: is someone moves out for college, and then mom throws the baseball cards out.
Although I go into those cards with my grandkids, and those cards are a lot more expensive these days than they were when I was buying them for a dime for a pack of
Yeah.
gum to get the cards out of it. Yeah.
So you played, what position did you play? You said you played baseball in, like, growing up and in high school?
Yeah, growing up and in high school, I was left-handed. I'm left-handed in sports. I'm right-handed in everything else, and I was a center fielder for the most part. Usually played center in high school, a little bit of first base. Tried pitching once, didn't work. Didn't work at all. It was extremely wild. So yeah, I was a center fielder.
So you can throw with your left and bat with your left?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Okay.
I'm used in racket sports because I want to hit ground strokes with my right hand, but I want to serve with my left because that's my
Okay.
natural motion. So yeah.
Okay. Now I see the Pete Rose, distinction here, because I think he was switched hit,
Yes,
I
he
believe,
did.
right? Yeah.
That was a thing years ago. I don't know if it's-
Yeah. That's awesome. Okay. Did you have any siblings growing up?
Had two sisters. Yep, both younger than me. But one was 4 years younger, and one was born much later in life. She was both have passed or deceased. But one that was probably about 12 years younger than me. Yeah.
Okay. And you grew up in like a small town, right? If I
Little town called
remember correctly.
Savannah, Ohio. Yes, in southwestern Ohio.
How far is that from where you are now?
About 40 miles. Yeah, not far.
Oh, okay. So it's not even far.
With us. He lives there still today. Yeah.
Okay. And sorry to hear about your sisters. I didn't know. Did they get to meet like your kids and
And my younger one did.
Okay.
Yeah. It was a horrible thing for my family and my parents. No parent should ever have to bury a child.
yeah.
Yeah, just a tragic thing with my one sister in a car accident. The one that's
Okay.
close in age. Yeah, yeah. Been a long time ago.
Did you growing up in that small town or around Ohio, did you have, as a kid, maybe in high school, did you ever have any like odd jobs?
I've been in sales, I think, since I was about 11 years old. Yeah, yeah. I was in.
What were some of those first jobs?
Yeah, I'd sell seeds. Literally, I'd order a box of seeds and I'd go door to door and sell neighbors radishes, tomatoes, flowers, and I'd sell these seeds and I'd keep the profit, right? And I had a paper out, and you'd make more money if you sold more subscriptions. So I'm always banging on doors trying to get more people to buy papers from me, and I was always selling something. I mean, I had an icy kind of thing where I'd go into ballparks and sell.
Really?
Sales for a very long time. Yes.
I always think though, like, I always feel like those early jobs as a kid are I don't know if you agree with this, but like you learn some of the greatest lessons. You might not be thinking about them in the moment, but I feel like there's, so many like great life and career lessons you can learn from those jobs.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, for one, you lose the fear of the word no, because if no bothers you, that's a problem, because as they say, you've got to fight through the no's to get to the yeses. And I definitely learned resilience and keep coming back for sure.
And your parents, what did they do for a living for the most part?
I think my dad was a somewhat inspiring story. He high school graduate, hated school as a kid growing up. I think he got in a little bit of trouble, nothing serious, but he told me a story one time about his teacher whacking him on the ear with a ruler, but he must have done something rough. At any rate, he just a high school grad, and and he was a welder, became a welder, and he worked on a factory floor at a company called Cincinnati Millicron, and he was a welder and machine tool kind of guy. And he decided at one point, he must have had some compelling event, like maybe having kids, that I need to go to college. And so back in those days, there was no online education, and he lived in a small town. So he drove when I was, I think, in the fourth grade, he started going to college at the University of Cincinnati. He'd drive 45 miles each way after work, working a full day. He'd go to night school at University of Cincinnati, and it took him 8 years. And he graduated with a degree in engineering.
Wow.
All the honors you could get. He had practically straight A's, almost all. It was like a 3.85, some kind of a grade point average, while working full time and having 3 kids and a wife. And it was monstrous what he accomplished. And the irony is, I graduated from high school, and the week later we went to his college graduation. So it's kind of cool.
That's awesome.
He really worked hard for a guy that didn't like school when he was young. He sure turned it up 17 notches when he went to college.
Wow, that's amazing. I never liked it when I was young, and I didn't like it in college. So that was really good. When you think about your parents, was there a lesson that maybe they modeled for you that you instilled in the boys, thinking back?
Yeah, I think one that I held to, they were not helicopter parents. They were not lawnmower parents, whatever the term is today, for people that, go out in front of their kids and make sure everything is smooth for them. They were not that. They absolutely let us deal with adversity. They didn't try to eliminate things, whether it's getting cut from the ball team or having a bad job or whatever it might be. They let us deal with it. They did not give us a lot. I had to work for things, whether it be a bike or a pair of Levi's or a pair of Converse tennis shoes back in the day when we all wanted. They were almost like incentives for me to do things. My dad would make me, in those days, you would burn your trash, right? Everyone had this 55-gallon drum out back, and he'd say, "Here's one match. Go light the trash." And I was on his honor system that I wouldn't bring my own matches from somewhere else. I had to light the fire with one. I was a Boy Scout. I had to light the fire with one match, or else light it with a flint. I mean, tough stuff. Wow. Tough stuff from Big Dean Hawk. But so an awful lot about perseverance, self-reliance, self-empowerment. That at the time, sometimes I thought, just give me a couple matches, or couldn't I have $5, but they were kind of that way, that we had to find our own way to make money for the most part. I mean, they'd buy me the big things that were needed, but I learned a lot about self-reliance, so that by the time I went off to college, I was ready to roll. I mean, it did not bother me a bit. I was looking forward to it because then I got to really flex that self-reliance a lot, and didn't rely on them much. I paid for most of my college education through my own means. And so that's what I took the most out of it, was they didn't lead me around by the nose, helping me do everything. I kind of had to find my own way a lot. Although the other side of it, very good for counsel, especially my dad. He would sit down and talk to me for hours about something that if I had a topic I was interested in or I needed help, he would definitely have those conversations. So that's the stuff I remember right off the top.
That seems like a great lesson. Is that something that because it seems like that's something you maybe also instilled in the boys? That's a big one. And so when you get married, are you talking about how you were raised, and those are some of the things that you want to instill in the boys?
Yeah.
Or is it just was it just natural?
I don't know if I might have thought it was natural at the time, but I definitely did not want to just be out front of them all the time, telling them what to do. They became, for whatever reason, and I have 3 boys. Everybody knows about the 2, but I have 3 boys. Matthew is our oldest. They were very self-motivated, and that was what I was very proud about. I remember one morning when I heard clanging around down in the basement, and I believe Ryan was in the 4th grade, AJ was in the 2nd grade, and they're down there lifting weights, pushing each other at a very young age, probably younger than people would advise, but it worked out okay. And so I think the fact that we stayed in the background, I was very proud of that, especially when my kids were in high school. I'd go watch their practice once in a while, but I'd stand really far away, and I don't want to get in the middle of it.
Yeah.
At Ohio State, and then when AJ was in the Green Bay Packers, the coaches probably vaguely knew who I was, but that was it. I let them go their own way, and I think they always appreciated that. But they also knew I was there to talk about anything they needed to talk about.
Okay. I heard that you always made it a point to be at their games, college, pro. Was that conscious and really intentional of you to be there and be present at all those big moments?
100%, 100%. Yes. It got a little dicey when they were both playing college football. They had about 2 or 3 years of overlap, and so my wife and I would split up, and she would go to whoever was playing closest to home. So she kind of went to everybody's home games. I went to everybody's road games, and until Ryan graduated, and I could go to all of AJ's games then at Ohio State. It was very important to me to always be there. I've had people say to me, because I did it in the pros too. AJ played 11 years in the NFL, and I only missed 2 games in 11 years. And I'd have people say, "Well, you don't go to the road games, do you?" And I'm like, "You go to your kids' games, right? Don't you go to your kids' ball games? I just get to do it for a longer time, you know." So I valued those so much, and especially on the road games, AJ would always know where I was sitting because I'd tell him, and all I wanted was it's usually like during or right after the national anthem, he'd just kind of look up at me and just kind of point. And that was all. That's all I needed. Them to acknowledge that I was there. Because they knew how important it was to me, and I believe it was important to them to know that no matter what I have going on, I got somebody in my corner back there rooting for me.
Do you kind of see them doing the same thing with their kids? I'm sure. I don't think they have like many games to go to
Yeah,
with the amount of kids, but have you
more
seen that?
more than I did,
Yeah.
honestly. I mean, I had a job that demanded I travel a lot when they were younger, and I would occasionally miss stuff. Never like a high school varsity game, but I would miss some stuff sometimes. But I was with my son Ryan the other day, and he was talking about he went to one of his daughter's coaches and said, "Can you give me the volleyball schedule? Because I've got some big customers kind of waiting for me to give them dates I can come in this time of year, and I'm not going to miss one of your games. So can I get that schedule now so I can get my business done?" So yeah, they go to extremes. Example: the NFL draft was just last weekend as we're taping, and AJ flew to Green Bay, did night one, got on a plane, flew back to Columbus, went to some of his kids' games, got back on a plane, flew back on Sunday to the draft again. Just because it was important to him to be home for those kids' games on that weekend. So he worked the Thursday, Friday, and then he got home and came back for Sunday because they were doing another show on Monday in Green Bay. So they
Wow.
go extremes to be there, to big extremes.
That's awesome. That's really cool to see that.
Yeah.
Um, Ryan did say about the sort of the helicopter parenting. He said he's there when we need him, but also intentional about not overstepping. And I imagine they both appreciated one of you at each game, or however the math was. And then, it just honestly, Pistol, it just feels like a huge time and financial commitment too. Just like, from the outside, like it's one thing to go to your kids' games when they're 8 years old. It's another thing to like make every college game, every pro game. So kudos to you and Judy for that. I mean, I just think that's really cool to hear that.
Yeah. What better could I spend my money on? So,
Right. Yeah. Okay. So,
that's why I have airplanes and hotels and
right. Yeah, it adds up. It definitely adds up. So let me ask you this. I started coaching my son's little league team. It's 7 to 9 year olds playing little league. It is wild, right? These kids, this is like 12 of my son, basically, just, but imagine you're sitting down because you've seen this, you've witnessed this, you've been in the sort of from that age through high school and college and pros and things like that. So imagine you're sitting down with a bunch of little league coaches, most of them parents, right? And you're giving a talk to them, and you're sort of giving them a message. What would you tell them in terms of, hey, here are like one or two things that you should be thinking about, coaching young kids? What message would you leave with them?
Hmm. Um, I think back to because I coached some football when the kids were younger. What I felt like was the most important was have a plan and a sense of what you're trying to accomplish that relates directly to playing the game. I noticed so many coaches spend so much time with their 11-year-old player football. It's called an 11-year-old Pee Wee football team. They spend so much time on calisthenics and running and push-ups and jumping jacks. I'm like, guys, you're wasting time. While you're doing all that, I got my guys over here learning how to play football. And so to me, we'd warm up, but I'm like, these are kids. They're already in shape for the most part. They're already in shape. So I'm not going to waste precious practice time on things that just because I don't know what else to do. So we're going to coach football. So we would get really into positional drills, teaching them to do what they'll have to do in the game as the way we spend our time, not just kind of having to flip around doing jumping jacks. And at the end of every practice, we'd always do, we call it running a trotwood, that was our rival back then. And we'd run a great big lap to end practice. And whoever was last, the guys that are out front would have to go back to the back of the pack and help the guy that's last get to the finish line because we all finish. Things like that I thought were important, but we very much focused on drilling and practicing playing the game, not all these other side things, because kids are already in shape. The other thing I would say is that I've had through the years many sport parents come to me and say, kids got college scholarships and one of them played in the NFL and one of them played in the Arena Football League. So you guys must have really done some things to get them there. And I would typically say, look, there's a couple of things you got wrong. One is a lot of it's determined at birth. I married a very athletic lady. She had a cousin in the NBA. She had like 4 cousins that played college basketball. So it starts to have that foundation that there is some ability that's in the kid. But the other thing that I think is more important that is being lost today is the specialization. My kids and I both have this opinion in a big way. We would much rather kids play multiple sports and compete. It's about competing is more important than specializing. So I would much rather, and I've heard many professional and college coaches say this too. They like guys that played basketball. They like guys that wrestled. They like guys that played baseball and of course playing football. If you play multiple sports, you just have more chances to actually compete in a game. And it's really, when it comes down to it, it's about people that are competitive and competing more than it is on having the best first step or the best way to turn your elbow on the swing. It's more about get out there and compete. And we're all for that. So I'm not a fan of the specialization era that we are in with year-round travel teams. My kids all played on travel teams, but they played them in multiple sports, not just one. So
that's great advice.
Yeah.
I was just listening to LeBron interviewing Steve Nash, and there's so much I didn't know about Steve Nash, but he was really a soccer player. He said, if I never played soccer, I would have never been what I was at basketball.
Yeah. He was a great soccer player in Canada. Yeah.
Yeah. Also, he played like lacrosse, all these other sports that you just never think about. But he learned he learned angles and things like that, just that you learn from other sports. And you could tell just how much LeBron revered him, which was the coolest thing of like, okay, like we saw this guy play. Maybe he was 10 years before his time, with the way that he played in that Phoenix Suns team that he was on. But it made me think of what you suggested is not to be too specialized. I almost feel like it also it could burn out the kid so easily, grinding, one sport year round.
Yeah. And I see it in golf, especially now. A lot of guys are hitting golf balls day after day after day. I'm like, it's supposed to be fun.
I heard you play a lot of golf.
Yeah. I do. I have a warped sense of what fun is, but yes.
Yeah. That's awesome. On that note, so like now that you've got maybe some more free time, how often do you play? And one of the things that Ryan mentioned is that you're really intentional about playing with your maybe some old colleagues, but like a close circle of friends that you have. It sounds like that's really important to you.
When I'm in my main town where I sit right now in Southern Ohio, I have just a few people that I really know well that I play with. I recently had a great experience though when we decided to live our winters in Florida, joined a club there with a neighbor friend of mine, and we do something that's very intentional. They have something on a tee sheet when you're signing up to play golf at this place we belong. It says join us. You can click a box and say join us. Nobody clicks that box. Everybody kind of stays with their little click. We've done the opposite. Every time we sign up to play golf, we say join us with these, and there's usually 2 slots open. And every time without fail, people join us. And every time without fail, they say, thank you for making yourself available to let us play with you. And they turn out, they're almost all great people. And so after just one season in this golf club in Florida, my neighbor and I, we played 50 times. We know 70 or 80 people that we wouldn't have known in the club, which means we probably know more than anybody in the club, and we've only belonged there for like 4 months. And so the lesson I learned is if you make yourself available, people really appreciate that, whether it's in a golf thing or in your neighborhood or anything else. So I've really taken on a mode of as I get older, make yourself available to know people. And some great things can happen as a result of that. You'll expand your circle of friendship. You'll learn a lot of things. And so I kind of, at home here, I kind of have the people I've known for a long time. But down there, I meet new people virtually every day because we played like 4 times a week down there.
Wow. And so if you don't check that box, it's just you and your buddies, and like no one can join you, it sounds like.
Yeah. And nobody else does it. You can look down the whole tee sheet.
Yeah.
We're the ones that have that join us thing open, and we're kind of known for that now. So
that's really cool.
Yeah,
that's awesome. How long have you and Judy been married, roughly?
I'll give you exact May.
I don't want to put you on the spot. It's probably a big number.
1980. So almost this is 2020. Oh gosh, almost 45 years.
Wow.
Almost 45 years.
Okay. Let's say you're talking to newlywed couple. What's a piece of marriage advice that you would impart on them, to have a successful? I'm sure it's not always, there's ups and downs, but like what's 1 or 2 pieces of advice you would impart on them for, to have a happy marriage?
I've always been scared of this thing that people get bored with each other, tired of each other, take each other for granted. I've been scared of that. I don't want that kind of a relationship. I want it to be like it was when you were first dating, when you would see them and it would kind of take your breath away a little bit. It'd be exciting just to see the person you're interested in. And I've tried to find ways to keep that going. And I had one little thing I did when I was working full time at LexisNexis. Before I went home every night, no matter what I had to do, I'd go through my end of day work and kind of looking at, all right, what's coming up next tomorrow and the rest of the week. And then I'd like literally give myself a timeout. I would walk down to the men's restroom with a tube of toothpaste and a toothbrush, and I would just stand there and brush my teeth and think about my wife and think about, all right, well, now we're clicking off. I'm going to go home, and I want to treat her like I'm going on a date with her, and I want to smell good, and I want to be clean teeth. That was my symbolic gesture to say, okay, now it's time for her. And the family, of course, but you've got to find ways to keep it fresh. And you've got to do things overtly, like little things like that, just to remind you that they're your date. They're not just your spouse. And so we've strived to find ways to keep it fresh like that. And to me, that's probably the most important thing, because I hear a lot of people that just seem that even the language they use with their spouse is not so good. Like, they don't use really good language to describe them and I try to stay away from that as well. Keep it like, hey, I'm excited about this person I'm with.
Yeah.
But it's easy for people to just kind of settle into a different, more lazy way of having a relationship, and I don't want a lazy relationship.
One thing Ryan said really stood out. He said about you, he's very intentional about taking care of my mom, a servant leader, and always puts her first. He's a great model for us on how to treat our wives. I thought, wow, like that's pretty cool.
I take that compliment a lot, very seriously. I appreciate that too. I just had a recent test of that too. She had sore shoulders. My wife's a jock and works out hard, and she had tore her rotator cuff and a biceps tendon in her left shoulder, and she had to have a really, really difficult. We learned how difficult after it was done, surgery to do that, a rotator cuff surgery and a biceps tendon surgery, and she her first like 3 weeks after that, she wasn't even allowed to lie down. She had to sit in a chair with her arm in this very tight sling, and she was supposed to sleep in a recliner. And I'm in the bed right next to this recliner that we sit up next to our bed, and I would wake up in the middle of the night and I would see her bent over, just kind of moaning and how in horrible pain. And so I took her recovery very seriously and said, this is my job. And I told her the other day, she said, oh, that was really quite a thing, what we've been going through here. And I said, no, I said, I've never loved you more. It made me realize how important the role I can play. And so to me, it is intentional. I'm glad the kids notice. But sometimes that kind of adversity can make you closer rather than draw you apart, because you realize they really are dependent on you. So that's
Yeah.
a little example of I guess I hope that I'm that intentional about it.
It sounds like you've modeled that behavior. And it's that thing that you always hear, right? Like for your kids, it's not what you say, it's like what you do and what they see you do versus telling them to do something.
There's a great poem about that I encourage to look at sometime. It's called Little Eyes Are Watching. I believe that's the name of it, Little Eyes Are Watching. And I used it at a sales meeting one time when I was talking to managers. And I'm like, no matter what you do, your team's looking to you for cues. They're paying attention to your moods. They're paying attention to how you operate, how you communicate. And I reminded them it's our duty as a leader to be in a good mood. It really is. It's our duty as a leader to be in a good mood. And I had used that poem before that said it's as if they're your children in some ways, because they're paying attention to you very closely. And so I was kind of conscious that there's these little eyes watching all the time, whether it's at work or it's at home.
I love that. And it's a good transition, but before we get to leadership topics, I did want to just like ask you wrote a book about sales, Get Real Selling. What compelled you to write it?
I had a colleague, a friend of mine named Michael Boland. We wrote the book together. I was working full time. I was the head of a sales force, and at that time it was about 1,500 people in total at a company called LexisNexis. I didn't want to cheat my company. I wanted to help my company by writing this book. So I had a couple of promises I made to myself. One, I would only write the book when I was flying. I was flying.
Really?
And so I wrote a little over half the chapters in that book, and every last one of them was written in the air. And in fact, I got to be superstitious about it. So I would only write when I was on an airplane. But fortunately for me, I was on airplanes all the time during the week and on the weekends going to watch football games. And so it was really meant to be, I think every leader has a responsibility of kind of codifying what they believe, how they like to operate, especially if it's leading a profession like the profession of selling, which I do consider a profession when it's done right and done well. And so I wrote this with the intention of getting it out there, at least to the people that worked on our organization and then more broadly in the world. But it was built around a very simple concept that said, my success can only follow the success of the customer. And I think if more salespeople worked that way, they wouldn't have a stereotype of some of the negatives that go with the broader group of people that call themselves in sales. So, but if you always live your life and your job like, I'm searching for opportunities to help somebody else's situation get better. I happen to be in sales for a great company that has products and services that can help companies improve their ability to be successful. And so I tried to instill that as the dominant thought our salespeople would walk into a customer meeting with. It says, my job isn't to sell this product. My job is to find out what's wrong here and how can we help.
It sounds like, through COVID and post COVID and, kind of the many things have changed right in the world of sales. Everyone's become an inside salesperson for the most part, or like, things are slightly changing.
Yeah. Inside their home office. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you feel like some of these principles have stood the test of time?
I think some of it's more difficult because people have less patience on the phone, or maybe Zoom is evening that out a little bit. But a lot of customers won't sit down for the Zoom call. I think what I believe still makes great sense. I still have the same challenge, find out my customer's biggest challenges and which of those can I help them overcome. So the job hasn't changed, but the venues in which we speak to each other has changed greatly. but fortunately, both sides of the equation are kind of getting accustomed to that. You do see a movement back toward the office for many companies, and so maybe it's going to be modified a bit going forward. But for now, to your point, COVID put us all inside, and it forced us to operate in a different way. So I believe my principles still apply, but they're applied in different modes rather than just me sitting across from somebody's desk.
Makes sense. Yeah, you have to adapt as well, right? In the sales approach. When you were overseeing that many people, about 1,500 people in the sales force, were they all in the U.S. or were they international?
For the most part, U.S. based. Yeah,
Okay.
my CEO that I worked for was the head of U.S. LexisNexis U.S. He worked for a guy that was head of LexisNexis worldwide. So yeah, 50 states. I occasionally had some Canadian responsibilities, but that was about it. I'd travel overseas, but it was more for sharing with colleagues that had my role in other countries within our corporation. But it was all U.S. based.
Was there anything you learned from those international travels from a sales perspective that was sort of a light bulb moment for you that, maybe that you can bring back here?
Um, we're different, right? I went to England, and a couple of things happened. One is I have a morning meeting customers, and then the team wants to take me out to lunch, and we go to lunch, and everybody's drinking beer, and I'm like, that's different. But it was a little cultural thing. But I had another cultural difference. I was giving a speech to our LexisNexis United Kingdom office, and I had flown over the day before, and my clothing got messed up, and I didn't have a suit. So, in fact, I think it was the trousers, right? I didn't, so I had to go get a different suit, and I'm relating a story to them, and I'm telling them about, I didn't have the pants, and I didn't have my pants with the suit, and I just kept using the word pants, and I was really telling a story about a great laundromat that actually hemmed on the spot a new pair of slacks I got, and a suit. They hemmed it for me. Great service. I'm giving that story, but I kept using the word pants. After I get done, to a little bit of polite applause, after I get done, some ladies from the office came over and said, Mr. Hawk, we realize you probably don't know this, but here in our country, the word pants refers to underpants. He says, pants. In your lingo, you're saying underwear, right? And I kept saying it. So I think it's important to understand the lingo, blend in a little bit before you go barging in with all your own U.S.-based terminology. But yeah, the big thing I learned is, the customers still have problems that need to be solved. It's our job to go solve those problems. Our language differences, some of our customs are a bit different, so we've got to try to learn and observe as we go from country to country.
That's funny. That's hilarious. Okay. One of the things I want to talk about was just like leadership in general. And I've heard you talk about maybe the commonalities of bad leaders, like some of the things that leaders are doing that maybe they shouldn't be doing. One of them being not having the self-awareness maybe that they should. Is that sort of like when you think about a few of the things? I'm curious if there's like an example of that might come to mind.
A lot. I'm self-editing because
yeah. So I'm thinking of a lack of self-awareness, and I've also heard you talk about
yeah.
We've got a mutual fan in Gary Ridge here, but assuming that the best way a company can get more profitable is to take cost out of the business. And so just wondering, like when you think about maybe what leaders could be doing better, what are some of the things that you're like, man, you just sort of you hear this and you shake your head?
For sure. Seeing yourself as a king is a good, that's kind of the extreme of the extreme examples, but sometimes people get in a position and they think they've become that position. They're not. They're a person who did some good things to get into the position, but they're still one of the crowd. To me, the worst examples of leaders that I can come up with would tend to be around the areas of bad communicators. And to your point that you just raised, a lack of self-awareness. I think one of the greatest gifts that could be given to someone is a great sense of self-awareness. I don't mean self-conscious, but I mean self-awareness. You understand the impact you have on people, that gives them the ability to understand you better. So trying to reach commonality, be on the same page, tear down the walls that get in the way between people, and really talk to people effectively is something to be strived for. I always felt that the best way for a new leader to get started was to be very clear about the mission, right? Let's talk about our shared mission. Let's describe it as vividly as we possibly can. This is why we're here. This is why we operate. This is how our business makes money. This is how our customers benefit by what we do. Make that mission as clear as possible. And then it's the job of you, and perhaps if there are levels below you, you and the managers below you, to make sure that every last person in the organization understands precisely how that person's role applies directly to the mission of the business. And if you really boil it down, every single person in the corporation, whether they're in sales or accounting or product development, wherever they are, they have a role that applies directly to the mission. But it's our job to make sure they get that, because otherwise people are just kind of coming to work and, bolting things together, or they don't really see the bigger picture. I think it's important that they know that mission and their role in that mission. And then I think it's important that we regularly communicate back, again, vividly, clearly, here's how we're doing. Here's how the company level's doing. Here's how your group is doing. Here's even how you're doing from the standpoint of performance. And it's not just the end result kind of numbers. Everybody likes to talk about business metrics, and they talk about what are sales, what is profit. Those are all important numbers. But I'm more interested in what can we do to get to those numbers. So to me, what we should be coaching to and what we should be measuring very aggressively is, what are the things we do that lead to the end result, not the end result itself. The end result is scoreboard, but what are the plays we're running, right?
Yeah.
How successful are we running those plays that get to a result? And so I think too often new people come into a business in a leadership role, and I call it banging on the number. You're just pounding away and saying, hey, our number is this, and it needs to be that. Let's try harder. Try harder is not exactly a strategy, right? We all want to try hard, but it seems like everything is a try hard strategy sometimes, when it really a leader needs to drill down into the business and say, what are the things that are our strengths, and what are the things that get in our way? And a big part of the leader's job is to eliminate those things that get in the way of success. And you can only learn those things if you're speaking to the people that are operating the business, that are literally operating, that encounter the things that make things go wrong, because they're going to be able to tell you, this is what I run into almost every time, right? And if we can blow those things out of the way, or build workarounds for those things, then we have a better chance to be successful. So that sense of self-awareness, being a great communicator, giving good feedback that's useful, managing the right numbers, not just the end result numbers, but the right numbers that drive those businesses, and then being a problem solver that says, hey, I've got my ear to the ground, I'm understanding things that get in our way, and I'm doing things to make those things get out.
It sounds like it's impossible to do if you're the ivory tower CEO that you mentioned, or leader that doesn't really isn't accessible.
Right. You can't sit back on some throne somewhere. You got to get out there.
Yeah. There's another Gary Ridge quote. I had a chance to interview him a couple weeks ago, and he said he was full of all these sort of like leadership isms. I thought you would like this one. He said, "The fish rots from the head. If you want an organization where you have psychological safety, you better live that as the leader. Otherwise, no one will believe you."
Yeah. Is this Gary Ridge from Valvoline or
WD-40?
WD-40.
Same guy.
WD-40, right. Yeah. I've read and heard him a bit. Yes, he's great.
He had so many of those good sayings. And so when I heard that, right, the fish rots from the head. If you want an organization where you have psychological safety, you better live that as the leader. I thought, well, you better be authentic. And so maybe you have an example of this in your time leading sales. Was there something that you did to just be sort of your authentic self that really connected with people?
I found the parts of our business that I tended to enjoy the most, and where I got the most feedback, and I had the greatest opportunity to reach the biggest number of people. We'd have an annual national sales meeting. And at that meeting, I would have the opportunity to speak to the entire organization about an hour, maybe a little less than that. And I could describe vividly, this is what's going on. And here's how we did. Here's what we hope for in the next year. And I'd try to do it in a fun way. I'd have photos of people that were doing great in other walks of life. And I'd try to relate our business to their walks of life. But I always felt like there's no substitute for direct communication with people that are involved in a business, making it run. And so lead from the front. The part of it that I was getting at is I made it my process that I had to be on a lot of sales calls. They weren't necessarily all sales calls, but I really a lot of customer visits, hearing our professionals, how they work with their customers, but hearing just as importantly, if not more, hearing the customers and what they're saying to us. So to me, the greatest opportunity as a leader is to be right there with your teams. People use the term front lines too much, but that's kind of what it is. Be there with the customers, whether it's something really terrible is happening in our customer relationship or something awesome is happening. Because I think it allows us as leaders to make better decisions when we're not out front, when we're back in some business meeting and we've got to make tough decisions about what we're funding and what we're not. If I've got vivid knowledge of what our customers are really saying and what our professionals that are working for us are saying, I have a better chance to make good decisions. And if you're in that ivory tower and you don't have that point of view, you're just guessing. You're just guessing. You don't like guessers.
I love that. And we use I don't think we use enough football analogies yet, but like that Pete Carroll approach. I was talking to somebody who played for him at USC, and he said Pete would have his cleats on. He wasn't sitting in a golf cart,
right?
20 yards away. Like he was in practice. Like he was running with us.
Oldest coach in the NFL, and he's out there still throwing the ball around and getting in the drills.
Yeah. I got a quick video for you. So I'd love to get your reaction to this. I want to talk about, I'm thinking about how you identify top talent around you, because obviously there's a big sales force, but you also have to hire people around you that you can trust. And I'm sure sometimes you hire, based on upside and potential versus just a resume. And so here's a quick video from someone I think you probably know. Let me light this up real quick.
Okay.
Whenever I can find that share button, give me 1 second. Like, where did they move it to? Here we go. Here we go. Okay. Let me know if you can see this.
Okay, I see it. It's not moving, but I see it.
Okay. Can you hear it or no?
Can't hear the audio. Mike Lombardi. I can't hear them, but I can see them.
Okay. Let me try one more time. If
Did you interview Mike?
I did.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah.
We spent a weekend with him at the national championship in basketball.
I feel like I seen you guys together. Yeah, like it was a while ago on social media. I think Ryan posted something.
Yeah. He's wild. I love that guy.
Yeah.
He's big in the leadership too, and building teams.
Yeah, oh, here we go, share sound. I had a chance to interview him. I've always been a fan of like listening to him talk about football, like the GM Shuffle podcast, which is one of those things if I'm doing something. And I want
now he's off it, but since he took the job at Carolina.
Oh yeah, okay. I haven't even attempted to listen to it for a minute, but I mean, I can go to YouTube, type in Mike Lombardi, and just see because he was one of those guys that would talk on other people's shows, right? So you would sort of cheat and just see like what was the latest thing that or the show that he might have been on, even like Pat McAfee show. He'd be a guest on that, and so I can listen to Mike. I can listen to a few guys just talk, for hours. Wow. And when he wrote maybe his second book about a year ago, maybe a little over a year ago at this point. That was the time where I got to chat with him. Okay, so I figured out how to share the sound here.
Good.
Let's try this again. I gotta grab this video. But
Got it. I got the sound there.
Okay. I just gotta get the right video here. You wrote a little bit about Deion Sanders. Was that like an obvious like thing when you saw him back then, or is that like okay, he was quick, but nobody knew?
No, no, he was pretty. Great players are easy to scout, right? They're easy to scout.
Tell me
It's
about
the
that.
good ones. It's the good ones that lure you into thinking they're great. They're just really good. It's very hard to evaluate really good or good, separating those two. It's not hard to evaluate great. It's just not hard to evaluate great. Great is consistent. Great stands out. Great is easy to identify. He was great. He changed, as Al Davis used to say, he tilts the field. He would tilt the field in your favor. Those are hard to find. That, to me, was what the Hall of Fame should be about. Players that tilt the field.
You
Get that. I found that in sales organizations with the very best.
It was like the line where he says, it's the good ones who lure you into thinking they're great. And his combine I was so young. It's not like I saw it, right? Very timely that, the draft just happened. But when you think of that in terms of like identifying talent, what comes to mind when you hear that video?
He's right. I mean, I think the great jumps out. I think it might be slightly more difficult in business because it's that the physical aspect isn't as present as it is in the sports world, where they can see them run, they can see them jump, they can see them tackle. Business, you've got to look a little closer. But it's unmistakable. People that are top performers, they're unmistakable, and it's easy to see, and they can translate from one job to another, one territory, whatever that it might be. The difference between really good and good is where you've really got to make good decisions. And I learned something when I got literally my very first job out of college that helped me and it advised me to this day. And that is, to me, interviews are useful, but are not enough to hire somebody. I can sit across from somebody and I can ask what I think are great questions. And to me, first of all, there are no real right or wrong answers. Well, there are some that seem kind of wrong, but there are no truly right answers to most interview questions. To me, I'm more looking for what are their motivations? How do they communicate? How do they think? Do they pause and take time to really gather their thoughts, or do they just blurb things out that they've kind of drilled themselves to say in interviews? So to me, it's never enough to just have an interview or even 3 or 4 interviews with somebody. Yet that team seems to be most organizations' process. They have some interviews. I'm much more a fan of simulations. When I was speaking to a minute ago, when I came to my first job out of college, it was with AT&T. They made me go through a full day of role plays, and they'd sit me in. I got there at like 7:30 in the morning, and they gave me an in basket full of exercises. And the very first exercise, we do them one at a time. You would study my role. What am I doing in this role? And then I would immediately, after I had a few minutes to study, be put in an interview room or a conference room with 1 to 3 people who are peppering me with questions about my job. And they want me to describe how I'm going to operate. They act in various roles, whether they be a customer or a boss, whatnot. And they wanted to really see how I worked, not just how I spoke in response to interview questions. And I went all day long. They had an in-basket exercise. They had a prioritization exercise. They had a bunch of customer meeting type exercises. They had discovery where I was supposed to learn things from a customer. They really got to see me work. And so I've tried to say as much as we possibly can, let's have simulations of the job so we can see how that person operates, not just a bunch of interviews.
Wow. That sounds like they were ahead of their time, like that's a great idea.
That was a long time ago. Yeah. I mean, I hate to say the years because it makes me sound even older than I am, but it's a long time ago. And they were ahead of their time. And I was delighted toward the end of my career with them before I joined LexisNexis. I had the chance to be on that interview team, or not that they didn't call it that. They call it something else about simulations, but I got to do that on the other side of the desk, and it's just really eye-opening that you say, wait a second, they came in looking the part, kind of sounding the part, but this this short guy over here with weird hair, he was the best, you know?
Yeah.
And so you get past some of those impression kind of things you have in meetings, and you really get at the meat of how people operate. And so I'm all about put them into the natural habitat of the job. And even if, for example, if somebody's interviewing for a job on the telephone, I prefer to have that interview on the phone because that's what the customer's going to hear, right? Now I want to meet them, but don't get me wrong, but I want to hear how they operate on the telephone. So you've just got to get them into whatever that natural habitat of the job is, and then find ways to make them operate and not just answer interview questions.
Was there one when you were at Lexus, was there a competency or trait that was important to you? Hey, like whether it's my VP that reports to me or a frontline salesperson on the phone with the customers, outside of like integrity and some of the must-haves, was there something that you looked for?
Yeah, it's hard for me to say one, but let me kind of bundle them. I really valued people that were organized, right? They organized their desks, they organized their files, they organized how they did research, they organized how they were going to plan their day, because they were trying to organize for efficiency and effectiveness. And that was something we really looked for. In fact, we didn't just train our managers. A lot of our managers did it on their own, but they would go out and have a desk exercise with people that were even home-based employees. Some of our sales reps in the field were home-based, and they'd sit down at the meeting and say, okay, let's organize your desk. Let's see how you would organize it. Let me give you advice as well. So that's a big part to me, is how do they organize for their days? How do they organize for success? And then to me, it's more about how they interact. Are they, I hate the term, people sometimes stereotype salespeople and they say, oh, that person would be great at sales. They're a good talker. In fact, my son Ryan and I were having this discussion the other day. He says he hears it all the time from people. They put this stereotype out that somebody that's a gabber would be good at sales. And I said, wouldn't it be great if we could turn that around and say, boy, Omaid's really a great listener. Wouldn't he be great at sales? To me, it's about being a great listener and their ability to gather information, sift through that information, as evidenced by their great listening, their great ability to make note of things that are important. That to me led to people that were successful, whether they're in sales or some other role, right? Because we're all in the problem-solving business. There wouldn't be all these employees in these companies if they weren't there to solve problems. And so how do they dive in, get the information that they need, and then go about organizing their work to solve the problem? So to me, it's a combination of organization and then the ability to interact effectively, listen greatly, and then develop resolutions based on what they see and hear.
It's funny you say that. I remember I was in a training at a company called Blackline. It was one of those sort of week-long, you're in there role playing, presenting, all these things. And the trainer actually used to work at LexisNexis. She knew you.
Really?
And yeah, her name, I forget her. I'd have to look her up. Her first name's Jennifer. You're learning a product, an accounting product, nothing about, and every company has their own sales methodology and things like that. And I remember, because I wouldn't say I'm an extrovert. I would say I'm probably more of an introvert. And she's like, so we did this role play. It was really challenging, right? It's just tough. Like in front of your peers, you don't want to look like an idiot, right? And so you're doing your best, right? And she said to me, she's like, you know what, your superpower is that you don't feel like you're selling me anything. And I'm not the person who talks or who pitches like crazy. And I never forgot that compliment, because it made me feel like, hey, I don't have to be, this sort of person who feels like I'm selling you something, right? Or that's really not probably the type of salespeople you want in your organization, that every time you get an email from them, there's like a pitch or something, like it was hidden agenda or something like that.
Say things like, if I can prove to you that, then will you buy from me? I mean, those kind of things are weak to me. I'm much more arrive at the solution, then it becomes obvious. Yes, this is the right thing to do. With your concurrence, we'll move forward next week. That kind of a way to get to the conclusion rather than just jamming. Yeah,
it's like the timeshare pitch, right? Kind of thing. Like you don't ever want to feel like that. I also think there's, I think at the end of the day, like being transparent with people is something, whether you're in sales or you're not in sales, developing relationships. And like, you know, even at my job today, I always tell people like, how do I add value to where not every communication from me is some expected sales pitch. And if they can think of me in a certain way, then I think I've done my job. But if you become that, like, oh, every time they see your name come across their inbox, they've already have this, conceived notion about you because of your previous behavior. There was a guy who's just retired and he had this like really good sales training. And I would rewatch it every few months or every year. And he would always say it's like death by 1,000 paper cuts. Like salespeople don't lose their integrity usually by one big sweeping email or interaction. It's these little things they do over time that degrade their integrity. Like I never forgot that, So I think there's always, there's all these different methodologies, but I think at the end of the day, people have to trust you to an extent.
Number one, I made a few notes before we started our call, and I was trying to think about things that are really important to me, and trust is in that list. It's in that small bubble of words, right? Another one is be a great teammate, but those two things really bubble up to me to the top. Am I a great teammate to the people around me, and do I build trust with others, and they rely on and trust in me?
I was going to ask you about that. Do you have a few more minutes, or how are you doing on time?
I'm okay for a few more.
Okay. So you mentioned like being a great teammate. I know you and AJ do this sort of maybe is it like a fireside chat keynote where you talk about business, he talks about sports, maybe it's the same sort of subject, and
one of our customers asked us to do something called the athletic organization, and we identified about a dozen characteristics, and I will bring it up in a business sense, and then I turn to him and say, in your world and football, and we did this back when he was an active player, the most. What is it? So, for example, being a great teammate. Here's what it means in my world, and then we'd say in your world, and we had a picture of somebody that he thought was a really great teammate, and he described why, and it was all about trust. He would say about this guy that was a defensive back for the Packers. I know where Morgan Burnett's going to be at all times. I know I can rely on Morgan completely. So if I'm running out here and I know my assignment kind of stops and changes when this guy cuts forward, I know Morgan's going to be there. I can trust it. I don't even have to look. And that was in his world, but it was all about trust. So being a great teammate is I'm available, but I'm also completely trustworthy and they can rely on.
And then how would you relate that in business? Like what was sort of that example there?
Being a great teammate. So in the business world, we have people of varying levels of expertise and knowledge on every team and every organization, because it's kind of a transitory world, and we don't just have the same teams together for years and years and years. And so there's always people that have more knowledge and experience, and people that have a lot less. And a great teammate is there for those, helping pull the ones along that don't have as much experience and knowledge. That's one example of being a great teammate. Another example is you literally dive in and help somebody when they've got a problem. And so those kinds of things that can happen that build such connections in a great team. So that's one example.
Yeah, I love that. When you were responsible for that big sales force, did it ever feel overwhelming? Just like that sheer, like when I think of like the revenue responsibility, that many people, and like, it just feels like a lot. Did it ever feel overwhelming?
I tried to not let myself have that feeling. But there are times that I've heard my son in some of his talks use the term imposter syndrome to describe, wow, am I really the best person for this job? Or you face a situation and go, oh man, what would so-and-so do? And I had an old mentor that I relied on, and I still do to this day. Fortunately, he's still alive, a guy named Mert McGill, who was my idol at LexisNexis for many years. He sold our product to the Supreme Court. He demonstrated our product to all 9 justices of the Supreme Court twice. All 9 came back for both meetings. So he must have been doing something pretty great with these customers. And he went on to lead our sales force. And he had the job that I ended up having years later and for many years. And I would always have this, what would Mert do kind of a feeling. But I'm not sure why I went there with Mert, but I'm just describing that having mentors around that can help you, and that you can say, well, that's how you do it. Gets around imposter syndrome, gets around overwhelming, because you've got to break down big challenges. You've also got to have people around you that you really rely on. I've been blessed with people close to me in my work that really would help me see things a different way, that really would pitch in and say, let me help. Sometimes being a leader of an organization, like a sales organization, can be a lonely job if you let it be lonely, but you've got to bring people into your circle, that you can help them, but they can help you, just as importantly. So I'd reach out to people, and not let myself be lonely in that feeling. I would quickly, if anything like that came over me, I'd step out of my office and go find somebody who would bounce something off you, you know.
What was the hardest business decision when you were in that role?
No doubt, when we had financial pressures, as every business ultimately does. My first 20 plus years in our company, we just grew and grew and grew. We used to say we could fall out of bed and grow 10%, you know. But when you get bigger and bigger and bigger, I mean, I joined the business, it was $80 million. When I left, it was like 3 billion. And so the bigger the number, the more difficult it is to grow. And the only way to have those profits that a publicly traded corporation needs to have is to have profits, constantly growing profits. And at some point, when your growth percentage narrows, then cost reduction becomes part of that equation in a bigger way. And a few times in my business career, we had mandated reductions in cost that my only cost were personnel and travel. I mean, that was basically, those were the two big numbers. You're going to cut so much travel before it's stupid, right? And so we had to make personnel decisions and have people leave the business. And some of them were very difficult. Those seemed to be the things that I struggled with the most. Not just that we had to do it, but then how you tell the organization that we're doing this and make it sound logical and not draconian, and that our process was appropriate. Fair is a word that's used sometimes, but appropriate is probably a more appropriate way to say it. That I struggled with those the most. To be honest, significant reductions in force.
Is there anything you would have done differently as leading that sales force, thinking back? Obviously, some of these things are somewhat out of your control, but anything you would have done differently?
Yeah, anybody that says no, they're lying. I mean, of course, we go back and assess, you know, self-scouting, if you will, to use a football term in. Self-scout, say, what could we have done differently here or there? And I think there are certain kind of technical things I would do differently. Like sometimes if you're focused on being very market oriented and say, okay, here's the large law firm market, here's the small law firm market, here's the corporate market, here's the government market. And I think there are times I would have said, you know, we could have spread ourselves more evenly if we would have been more geographically based and less market based. That's a technical example of things we would say in the future. Maybe we don't just let ourselves live in these artificially developed vertical spaces within a business. I do some of those kind of things, but I don't have a lot of feelings of wow, we blew it there. I would say we did our best. We did our best.
Who would you say had the biggest impact on your career? Was it the guy you just mentioned?
Mert is the one who was like my guiding kind of Yoda kind of guy, right? You know, Buddha. But there were a lot of people that were very important to me. I had some great leaders that I worked with, even people that I didn't think were great had impacts. I mean, I learned things from them too. But I'll give you one thing that probably was a dividing line in my career. We were acquired by another company at one point, and a few years after that, we got a new U.S. CEO. And the outgoing CEO gave me a call and said, hey, you know, getting a new CEO, and the most fired position in any big company is the head of sales. That was me. And he said, heads up, he says he might come in with his own person predetermined, because that's the position that gets replaced the most when there's a new CEO, and he brings a new head of sales. And as it happened, there was such a thing. And I'd heard about this a little bit. And I rather than just sit there and sit back, I called that new CEO and I said, hey, would you mind having breakfast with me when you're going to be in town next week? And he agreed. And I sat down with him and I said, I wanted to share with you something that you may not expect coming from me as your head of sales. I said, every time a new CEO comes into an organization, he's probably got people in his past that he really trusts and relies on and wants to bring them into the organization. And I'm very aware from my experience that the most common role is the role of head of sales. I said, so I don't know whether for sure you do or do not have somebody that you'd like to bring into that role. But I want you to hear this about me. I am a collection of experiences, knowledge, and skills that I've acquired in this job as the head of sales. But I am not the role. I am a collection of experiences, skills, and knowledge. And if you are indeed thinking about having somebody else in this role, I would urge you to not just throw out this collection of knowledge, experiences, and skills just because I was in that role. I would urge you to think openly about how could I utilize these experiences, knowledge, and skill in another way to the betterment of this corporation. And he was taken aback by that because he did have somebody in mind that he was going to bring into the business. It was his every intention. And that day, we described and created a new role for the company. Where it's not important what I was called. It was VP of something or other. But I would go out into our toughest customer situations or our biggest opportunity situations and help the sales team in their customer-facing presentations that they would make, whether they're trying to defend something difficult or go after something big. And it was the greatest 5 years of my business life in some ways, because I was in front of customers all the time. I was flying all over the country into these situations. And I'm like, I am freaking battle tested here. I've been in and out of all these situations. And the irony is that head of sales that came in to replace me in my prior role became one of my best friends in the company. And I think I was somebody he relied on strongly. And I told that guy on day one, I will never cross you. Don't you ever worry about me wanting your job or resenting your job. In fact, I love this other thing that I'm in now. I'll be your biggest advocate. And please let me help you in any way that I can. And that became a great relationship. And the ultimate irony is he decided to leave the company after about 5 years. He called me the morning he was going to resign and he said, Keith, I'm going to resign and I'm going to recommend that you go back to your old job and replace me. And that happened.
Wow.
So it was the same CEO, this guy, and me in this little triumvirate of circumstances. And it made me so much better the second time I was in the job, because I had this about 5 years of experience where I was out face to face, battling it out, winning, losing, whatever, to really understand our company and our business in a way that I never would have had that opportunity. So it was a real big deal to me that, one, I survived when most would have just said, heck with this, I'm going to leave. They don't want me here. No, it wasn't that they didn't want me. It's just they wanted this other guy, and I gave them an alternative ahead of time. So that was a notable thing that happened in my career, and I still talk about it with those two guys from time to time.
That's crazy. It sounds like, you go back to being a great teammate. You were a good one, right? Being supportive, but also identifying an opportunity for yourself. And then I imagine those 5 years, you talk about pattern recognition, because I think that's hugely important in sales, especially within the company that you're in, because of all the nuances of products and this, like the whole sphere, right? And so you all of a sudden become this weapon when you get your old job back, and having insights you probably never would have imagined.
I was a sharpened weapon, yes.
Yeah.
There's a lot of truth to that. It was the best thing that ever happened in my career when I think about it. Yeah.
Okay. Quick pivot, couple questions here. You have a buddy who's going on a 6-hour flight, and he says, your son's podcast, you've been telling me about it. I've got this flight. I can only download 3 episodes. What are the 3 that come to mind that you think people should listen to?
I know one of Ryan's that's really important to him is, I believe her name is Cap Hopkins. She started as a Hooters waitress, and today is this, I believe she's, if not the CEO, and the executive form of Athletic Greens, a major corporation. That one he's really proud of.
Cat Cole.
Coach.
Yeah.
Cap Cole, thank you. The coach of the old coach, basketball coach that's the guy that got Nike and Michael Jordan together and helped him out. He's a big philosopher. I'm losing guys' names right now, but
Oh, I know who you're talking about.
George,
Yeah. Yep.
I really like George Traveling, that one, and then I'll throw in the latest episode that AJ and I did with Ryan. I really enjoyed that one. We've been doing them every 100 episodes since he began, and I felt like we really got into some stuff in that last one. Not just the
drafts. Yeah.
Everybody talks about the draft, but I felt like we really got into some stuff on that last episode we had. I don't know, was it 600? But yeah, I would say that preserved one of the Hawk Boys. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Is there a book that you think that's impacted you that you think other people should read?
Well, the book answers The Score That Matters. My son's latest book, Ryan's book. I really think it's spectacular because it's different. He and his co-author Brooke Cups on that one really dive into the process and how you go about things is important. It's so important. And process leads to outcomes. And I even played golf with a young college golfer, female college golfer, who was telling me, "Oh, I read that book, and I went to the class that Coach Cups taught on this, and she said it completely changed my focus on how I go about my business as a golfer and about trying to win." And she said, "I don't focus on the end result nearly as much as I focus on, am I doing all the things I need to do to be successful? And if I do, I'll stack up all that work, and it's going to lead me to the results that I'm seeking." So I'll say that one personally is really important to me. But the other one was from many years ago. In Search of Excellence was a tremendous book that lived on for decades, of investigating companies that are successful and why they're successful. And I feel like those two guys that wrote that really came up with some golden nuggets that every business should pay attention to. Now, ironically, a lot of those businesses aren't around today. Here, it's probably 40 years later, but it was a heck of a book that I still fall back on from time to time.
That was the Tom Peters book.
Yeah. And
I'll put it on my list. I have not read it. Well, I've heard of it, obviously,
that's
but yeah.
Yeah, that's their
Okay.
original. And Tom Peters, Ryan interviewed Tom Peters, and Brian told him about how much of a fan I was. And Tom Peters, after that interview, sent me a bunch of his books.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, it was great.
That's really cool. Okay. Fast forward 20 years from now. What would you hope your boys say about you as a dad?
I'll say something that they've said recently, and I've heard at least two of them say that. My kids have said he was always there for me when I needed him. AJ would say things like he would stand under the basket and catch 300 free throws and just throw them back to me. Ryan would said something like, we would go to the batting cages in the middle of the summer at 11 o'clock at night, and we would just be there for hours hitting baseballs. He'd be there as long as we wanted to stay. And so to me, I hope they would say he continued to be available to us all the way through. So that one to me is that, you are open to and available to your kids, especially when they need you.
Love it. Last question. You're talking to someone who's early on in their career. They want to make a big impact in this world. What are 2 or 3 pieces of general life or career advice that you would impart on them?
So you're in a job, you just get the job, organize your life, be able to be proud of how you go about your business. And that starts with how you organize your desk, how you organize your notes, how you organize your daily plans. To me, that's of vital importance because too many people are sloppy in their work. Secondly, I would say be a tremendous communicator. If you're not now, then get after it. Join a public speaking group, go to school, taking specific courses on how to be a great communicator. And that includes writing and speaking, not just speaking, a lot of people think of. Because I think in my career, the ability to do public speaking has helped me immensely, probably allowed me to outrun my other skill set just because I could do that. And so I think it's of critical importance. And then the third thing I would wrap it up with is always be focused on being a great teammate, not just an individual contributor, but I want to be a great teammate to the people around me.
Love it. Pistol, I appreciate you leaning into this. This is awesome.
My pleasure, man. My pleasure.
Is there anything you feel like we missed?
I love that question because I call that a fallback question at the end of an interview. What else should we have talked about that we didn't? No, man, you covered a lot of ground, and we'd just be piling on now. So
Yeah,
maybe
no, I love it. I
your
appreciate
own
it.
podcast we'll have some different topics. But no, you got it all. Thank you, Omaid.
Cool. Thanks again for just making the time to do this. I look forward to putting together. And yeah, I feel like I could talk to you for hours. So appreciate you doing this.
I appreciate that, man. I thank you. Have a great rest of your day.
Cool. I will too. Tell the family I said hi.
All right, man.
All right. See ya. Bye.
See ya.